Okay, so we're going to go ahead and begin. And I'm excited that you're all here. And our agenda today, we're going to be looking at our new learning. We're going to look at a lesson from the field. We've got some teachers that are going to share what they've done. And then we're going to be sharing, I want you to share what you've been learning. So the first thing that I want us to look at is what we learned at the Institute. And I want you to think about those 4 big ideas that we talked about. The first one was connections. And we talked about how a high quality math curriculum for adult learners should feature worthwhile tasks such as activities that are drawn from the context of real life experience. And we want to know how the math relates to the student. Communication, we should be making sure that the students are communicating their mathematical thinking coherently and clearly to their peers, their teachers, and others. And they analyze and evaluate the mathematical thinking and strategies of others. So it's the students, and that should be using math language to talk about how they solve problems. And then we talked about mathematical proficiency, and it actually had 5 components. It had the conceptual understanding, and this was where there was comprehension of the mathematical concepts and the operations and the relations. The procedural fluency, we talked about when and why we would use these procedures, and it's that skill in carrying out procedures flexibly, accurately, efficiently, and appropriately. The strategic competence was the ability to formulate, represent, and solve mathematical problems. Adaptive reasoning was looking at the capacity for logical thought, reflection, explanation, and justification. And also we talked about how there are multiple ways to approach a problem. We also talked about the productive disposition, and when we talked about that, we talked about the math phobia and how students, we want to make sure they have a positive attitude and that they see mathematics as sensible, useful, and worthwhile, but also couple that with the belief that if they're diligent, that they can achieve and solve these problems. So the last strand was thinking about all strands developed at all levels. And we talked about how a high quality math curriculum for adult learners should include the concepts of number sense, data, geometry, and algebra at all levels of learning so that students can develop and connect mathematical ideas. And then if you'll remember this slide that we had, we talked about how one of our tasks as teachers is to deepen and solidify understanding by connecting the visual models, the situations, and the symbols. So those were some of the new things we talked about, the big ideas in our training. And now I want to hear from you. How did you incorporate these new strategies in your math instruction? So I'm going to unmute everyone. And I would like to hear from you. How did you incorporate these new strategies in your math instruction? Don't everyone talk at once, or I'll start naming names and you'll have to talk.
We're like students, aren't we?
All right, Shannon, you're talking, so go ahead and tell us how did you incorporate these new strategies in your math instruction?
We did 2 new lessons that the students seemed to enjoy. I think they really enjoyed the Mom and Pa Kettle. I had one lady in the class, only one who knew anything about them. The rest of them were like young and had no idea. But they enjoyed that, and they enjoyed, and I would have never thought of doing the video with it because I had seen that video, but had never thought about incorporating it into class. They did enjoy it. And then the other one that I did was traveling with time. And that was one that we had not done, but I think it made them stop and think about how far things are from each other and how long it would take. So that's going to be interesting.
Okay, I think we're getting a lot of feedback, so I'm going to mute everyone. And so if you want to talk, just unmute yourself one at a time, and maybe that'll help with some of the feedback. Okay, would someone else like to tell us how they incorporated some of their new strategies? Or Shannon, would you, well, we're going to ask some questions and maybe you'll give us more information about how you did some of what strategies you used while you were doing this instruction. Anyone else? Okay, well, you're shy, so all you have to do is just unmute yourself. If you're having trouble unmuting yourself, let me know and I'll unmute you.
This is Gayla. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, I'll just let y'all know we did the wish list lesson that's in the teacher's book. I forgot the name of it, but the first green book that we used, you know, that y'all introduced to us at the class, and that's where they have an event and they have to actually, you can see on the right hand side of the screen, they actually had papers from our local grocery store, and they had to estimate how they could we told them we were going to have a Halloween party, and they had to plan for so many people, and they had X amount of money, and they had so much fun doing that, and they did a really good job. We had some really good estimators, but it was kind of, we've been talking about estimating. We did the number of the day thing, and we talked about how you could estimate that way as well, and then you know, all the ways you could play with number of the day, but estimation has been kind of like a new concept to them that they never really thought about, that they've been doing that all their lives probably, but they didn't know how much they could help them in their everyday life, and especially looking toward taking the HSC, how much that could help them on their tests. But they had a lot of fun doing the wish list, and it was kind of how their eyes just kind of opened up. Hey, I do this all the time, and I'm really doing math, and I'm not so afraid of it anymore. So it's kind of cool.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for the pictures, Gayla.
You're welcome. Are you still there?
I am.
On the left-hand side of the screen on Halloween, we did the Mona Lisa thing, except we did it with the Scream picture and painting. And so I just substituted that since it was Halloween. And so, but we did that same thing that we did in our ANI class with that, and the students had fun with that as well. And what I did realize was I didn't do enough foundational instruction before, because a lot of them were a little bit clueless about how to find the measurements of the pictures and how to, you know, compare them and everything. I should have done a little more foundational. I kind of assumed they knew some things that they didn't know.
Okay, nice. Would anyone else like to share?
Yeah, this is Rachel. Rachel Norman Embry, variously. I'm in the process of changing my name, so I don't know how y'all know me. Yeah, I've done the 4 operations. What do they mean? Just that simple activity, something that we would think was very simple. And I've had several students say things like, you know, nobody has ever shown me this, especially with multiplication, how it's just groups. Somehow some students just miss that. And you know, they'll say, you know, I wish I had known this a long time ago. I mean, why didn't anybody ever show me this? And I've gotten a lot of that. And, you know, a lot of times I don't focus on the simpler aspects, and this is teaching me that I should, because they need those conceptual things. Even the most simple thing that I would take for granted needs to be explained And so that's a value that this training has given me.
Great. At this time, I'm going to let Kenesha Barnes and Celicia Williams share, and I gave them some questions that they needed to answer while they share. So Kenesha, if you and Celicia will unmute yourselves and share what you did in your class, I would appreciate it. Okay, we're not hearing you. Okay, I unmuted you. No, we're not hearing you.
They may have to make sure that their microphone on their computer or whatever device they're using is not muted.
Kenesha, if you want to come down to my office, you can come down here and talk. I think she's coming down here. You might have to come here and reach. Okay. Okay, they're here in my office now, so they're going to talk to you about what they did. Come over here.
All right. Hello, everyone.
They're muted.
Okay. The lesson that we did was comparing the volume. We actually participated at our new enrollment. We did comparing volume using the popcorn lesson that we participated in when we was down in training with our new students. The students, they were very eager and excited, and they all kept a positive attitude throughout the whole participation. As you all see, we did the different volume measurements, and we had to instruct them with the different formulas.
So we incorporated some of the new learning, and hi, this is Kenesha. We incorporated some of the new learning from the Institute by having multi-leveled instruction. And for us, this was something new because all of our classes are usually leveled. Everyone is scoring about the same thing on the tape, so we can kind of start our instruction at the same level. And so this was interesting, especially to do it at orientation as of course, it wasn't complete instruction because we don't want to do instruction at orientation, but it was just to give them an idea of what a math experience would be like here. And so that was great. We also used, as you can see, visuals, conceptual understanding, and informal deduction. The students, like she said, responded great to this. They were excited. I think that it motivated them to realize that they would have a positive experience in the math classes. I mean, we maximize communication amongst the students by asking all open-ended questions. And we also encourage adaptive reasoning. So they were able to discuss why or why not, why or wouldn't their partner's answers be correct. So that was great. And like I said, they were extremely motivated. Some of the strengths that we found as facilitators would include, it was easy engaging the students, especially by using visuals and popcorn, because students always love a treat. And some of the weaknesses I think that I experienced as a facilitator, was actually building the lesson, because sometimes we don't really realize the gaps that the students have concerning a particular subject matter. So it can be difficult to make sure that you really build the lesson so that it could alleviate any absences or gaps that they may have.
Thank you. Did anyone have any questions for them? Okay, I did want to show you the pictures from that Misty and Tiara added. So these are some of their students. Misty, is Misty on? Would you like to share anything?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My students thoroughly enjoyed all of the things I've tried. I've tried the Mona Lisa as well as the popcorn activity. The popcorn was their favorite, and they almost were in competition to be like, well, I'm right, you're wrong, that kind of thing. So they've really, really enjoyed the hands-on activities.
Great. So I want to ask you some questions and see for our discussion as we go further. How did the lesson that you incorporated, how did the lesson incorporate the new learning from the Institute? And what was new for you as an instructor in presenting the lesson to your students? So if you'll unmute yourself and answer these questions, we would appreciate it. And anyone can jump in for any of the lessons that they did. Gayla, you had shared what you did. What was new for you as an instructor in presenting the lesson to your students?
What was new for me as far as how I actually presented it, or as far as the student input, or like how it's specifically you want me to answer?
Yeah, that's for the student or for you?
Okay, for me, it the main thing was, I think that I found out that with adult education, I had to kind of be more intuitive about where they are in their journey, and maybe not assume things that they already knew, because since I haven't been with them through this whole pathway up to this point, I probably assumed things that I shouldn't have, as far as what kind of a foundational ground I should have given them. That was probably something that I realized that I need to do better. And so that was kind of a new thing for me. This is my first year in adult education, so that's why I'm saying that. I realized that I've got to be more aware of that. And then I think the students, I think it was this, and because they are adults, I think that I'm trying really hard not to talk down to them, but I realized that that it's fun. The things that I think that might be like for example, when we did the wish list, where they're doing, where they're just looking at Ramey's grocery store ads and doing the wish list, they had a great time doing that. And so that was good for me to realize that they're not going to be insulted when I do that kind of instructional activity with them, but they all participate, they engaged, and they had fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. Anyone else? What was new for you as an instructor in presenting the lesson to your students? Come on, Misty or Cynthia. I know y'all been sharing some of the things you've been doing.
Well,
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I was like the other people. I was surprised because I thought I'm not going to say I thought they knew more than they did, but I just assumed that they knew certain things that they did not. And that was surprising to me. But one thing with the candy, that they had to estimate those, we had to take them out, and it was a group effort of everyone counting. It was almost like 1, 2. Everyone wanted to see who was the closest. So that was somewhat fun.
Okay, great.
Yeah, mine's pretty similar to that. I'll admit I did assume that, I have a couple of students who are right out of high school. So I assumed, well, they're right out of high school. They know some of these foundational things and they do not. So I had to adjust, just kind of step back before you let them continue the lesson. You have to kind of go over those type things. So I guess that was new for me as well, because like her, this is my first year teaching as well in adult ed.
This is Kenesha. I also wanted to add, as far as what was new, I know oftentimes when we're in teaching mathematics, if a student doesn't get an answer correct, we want to maybe rework the problem, even if we identify the error. But I focus more on the if and then to promote like deeper level thinking with the students. So rather than just handing out answers, it was, well, if this is this, then, and so they had to kind of dig deeper themselves to figure out what was the next step or the next process to math problems.
Great. So tell me, how did the students respond to these new strategies you used?
Mine loved it. I've had really good response from them. At first when you kind of give them the supplies and things and maybe a question sheet, they're just looking at you like, what in the world? But once we do it, I've had probably 2 or 3 that respond by, can we do this for every single lesson? So they love it. They really do. They're responding very well.
That's wonderful. That's what you want, engaged students.
Mm-hmm.
This is Salisa. The ones like the lesson that we did here, it was with new students, during our orientation session. So it kind of got them engaged and excited of what to expect when they started their new classes this week. And I did have one of the new students to ask me when we're going to do another fun activity. So that let me know that she really enjoyed it that day that we did it during orientation.
Great. Anyone else? So what connections do you hope the students make with the lesson that you gave them?
Well, this is Kenesha. I would hope that the students would actually associate the different, mathematics with one another. So for instance, that multiplication is found in measuring and in volume, that they would actually associate the foundational concepts that they're understanding as they continue to grow in math. And also realizing that they really do use math in everyday life. That is not something that they should be fearful of, because they're probably doing it fluently, with calculating their pay, from work or grocery shopping. So just making a realistic connection and then seeing that math actually builds upon different concepts.
Okay. Anyone else?
This is Gayla. That was probably the same, very much the same with me. We used the little chart where they had to write down when and where they use math, and do they do it in their head or with a calculator or paper, and they would you get an exact amount or an estimate. And it was interesting when we discussed out loud all the different ways that students use math that I never even thought out of. For example, one of our guys, he's a fisherman, and he was talking about how he has to estimate and calculate in his head how far to throw at the line when he's bass fishing. And I never thought about things like that, but it kind of opened their eyes, just like Kenesha said, to realize all the times and the places that they really do use math, and it's not so scary as they thought.
Those were great connections. That's good.
Well, and you do want them to make connections. I found out like one of the ones that we did was the traveling with time, and it was 3,000 miles they had to cover, and if they covered 300 miles a day, how many days would it take them? And this one student said it would take 12. And I was confused as to how he got that. And I said, well, explain to me what happened or how he came up with 12. And he goes, well, you got to stop and go to the bathroom, and you got to stop and eat too. So, you can't do that. And I'm like, okay, point taken.
Right. That's wonderful. So how was the communication among students maximized? Did you find your students communicating with one another?
I think that was one of the things that I really felt like was so valuable to us, because all of a sudden we have students that are engaged with one another that are usually in their little cubicles working alone. And then we have new students that didn't know anybody yet. We had some activities where we did groups together, coming up, solving problems as a group and our pairing. And we really felt like that was so valuable to our classroom, and we're starting to do that even more in some of our other subject trainings too, to actually do things in group sessions where they have to engage each other, because we feel like that's helping the whole atmosphere and the whole feeling of our classroom. So we're really liking that.
Wonderful. Anyone else?
Well, I don't want to keep talking, so I'm going to stop after this. But I've had several students who have become really close after doing that group work because they didn't really know each other. But then after doing that, they kind of like good friends. They've exchanged phone numbers and they do text messaging and all of that stuff to each other.
Well, that would surely help with retention, wouldn't it? So having students engaged and communicating with one another in class and then outside of class, that's going to help them, and it's going to ultimately help you keep them in class. That's wonderful. So as we think about the lessons that you did, what standards or what level was addressed in the lesson that you did? Okay, Kanisha's going to share.
Well, for the popcorn lesson in particular, of course, we use the measuring and estimation of lengths and geometry. There was multiplication, division, and of course, addition. And we looked at shapes. And so those standards actually went, when I went to the TABE manual, it was actually like from 2 all the way up to 5. So we covered an extensive amount, because when you're talking about identifying shapes, vocabulary, and then you begin to add in actual measuring, and then you look at the actual formula, you really can cover a wide range of standards. So it was interesting to me to see how many standards one lesson could actually include.
That's wonderful. And we always talk about how are we going to do lessons with multi-level classes. So one lesson can hit multiple levels. Anyone else? Y'all are surely quiet. So let's talk about this. What was your biggest challenge in presenting your lesson?
This is Salisa. Kanisha and we talked about it. The biggest challenge that seemed to be that we had was exactly knowing where to start, because, we started with a group of students that was in orientation. And so we were just there and trying to see where to start, where exactly to start with them, on what level. And it also was a challenge, trying to get them familiarized with coming in, knowing the formula that we was actually doing proceed with the assignment that we were doing with them. So that was just a little challenge. But once we started with them, they really became engaged. They were like, oh yeah, because they were like, oh yeah, I remember. They started even telling us the formula. So that was the biggest challenge. But once we started working with them with it, they overcame it.
Wonderful. How about the rest of you? I see a lot of people on here, but no one's talking.
This is Monica in Byhalia.
Hey, Monica.
Hey, initially a challenge for me was how I group my students. I allowed them to pull numbers and then group them by the numbers. But after actually starting after we actually began, I had to regroup them and kind of put some higher level students with the lower level students, and it actually worked because the higher level students, by them having that prior knowledge, they were able to assist the lower level students.
Okay. Anyone else want to share their biggest challenge? Okay, so one of the things we talked about was being a facilitator of the learning. So I want you to tell me, what did you find was a strength that you had as a facilitator of learning, and maybe what was a weakness that you found as you were doing these lessons in being a facilitator of the learning?
Sometimes I think a weakness of mine just in general is the assumption, like I said earlier, that students know more than they do. And then sometimes, we get things and it's hard for us to understand why they don't get things, or it is for me. I may be the only one in that boat, but I guess it's a little bit of frustration sometimes when you're, trying to explain the activity and they don't get it, and you don't understand where to meet them at sometimes. So I learned that with, I forget which lesson it was, but we overcame it and completed it, and all ended well. But I think that's to me one of my weaknesses.
Okay.
This is Rachel again. One of my weaknesses has been that I don't question enough. I don't, I'm very quick to give the solution if they have given me a wrong answer. And through this training, I'm getting better. It's becoming one of my strengths that I now will question and take them through that reasoning process to arrive at the answer, or at least think about why this answer is wrong, and just doing all the things that we should as effective instructors, as far as just not just giving them making them work for it and go through those processes. So that has been one of my weaknesses, and I think I'm getting better at it. So I hope so.
Wonderful. Anyone else? So what did you learn from the experience? What did you learn from teaching these lessons and incorporating these new strategies?
Well, I think this is Rachel again. I think we've already talked about a few things that we learned. Well, what I just talked about is one thing that I'm learning how to do better, but also what we talked about earlier, and several people have mentioned it. Just it's helped me learn not to assume that my students know things, and I've known this, of course, because I've taught adult ed for a while now. But it's always good to be reminded of that, and to see it when you do break things down better for students and make sure that you're covering those foundational things, and you see that light bulb moment where where they say something like, I've never seen it that way before. Nobody's ever showed that to me. And it would have made a world of difference if I had known this. That's what I'm learning from the experience and being reminded of, is not to focus so much on the higher, what we consider the higher level type teaching situations, but just to make sure that those foundational things are there, and focus on that more, so that you can then build more strongly upon what you laid, the foundation that you lay down.
Yes. Good points. Anyone else? Some of you have not shared anything. Can you tell us at least one thing that you learned from this experience? Okay, well, I know Heidi's going to pull it out of you when we get back down to the Institute. Heidi, do you have anything you would like to share or comment on?
I am just so pleased to hear the things that you guys have shared. And I've been taking copious notes, because a lot of your feedback is related to some other work that I'm doing. And it's really heartwarming to hear that after a couple of days and you guys going back and trying things out, you're identifying some of the most important pieces of what this training is about and what the materials are about. And that's helping students, one, to see their skills that they do come to the classroom with. And I love the idea of doing this at orientation. Holy smokes, what a great idea. I've never thought to do that, but why wouldn't we? What a great way to show students that we care, to put together dynamic lessons. So kudos to you for doing that. I also appreciate you guys are naming where students are seeing the engagement, the effect it's having on them. They're feeling, you're naming things that you're saying, I thought the students would know this, and I was surprised that they didn't. And on the flip side, I'm hearing, and those students were okay acknowledging that they didn't know it. You had immediately created a space for them to have those conversations and not be embarrassed or feel concerned or hindered so much that they wouldn't contribute to the dialogue. So, you're doing the very things that I would hope that you would have taken away from the first Institute, and very, very excited to see where we go with Institute 2 to build off of these things. So thanks for doing all of that. Do you guys have questions before Institute 2 that I can answer? I know that there was a question about how many work samples do you need? One, just one. Pick something that kind of shows the range of your understanding, and the things Cindy talked about today. Those questions really show up in the design of the work sample. So if you've been listening to these conversations today, it's giving you a snapshot of what goes into your work sample, but you just need one. We are going to take time at the very beginning of Institute 2 to talk about your work samples, and everybody will be paired up. So you'll want to have your materials ready to talk about. And you just need to try 6 activities. You can certainly do more, but 6 activities. You don't have to bring proof that you've done them, although some people like to bring in student work just because it's exciting to show maybe something, a big aha that you had. So feel free to share those things.
Okay, well, I'm proud of the work you're doing and what you're learning. And if there aren't any other comments or questions, we will see you December the 2nd and 3rd. Remember, that's a Monday and a Tuesday. We'll be down at Table 100 again. Okay, Tiara, do you have anything you want to share before we leave?
No, I was just going to remind everyone about the second institute that you've already shared the date. So we'll just see you all there. I believe we're starting at 8:30. Is that correct?
Yes.
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 So we'll see you then. And we'll apologize for the technical difficulties earlier.
Okay.
And
Well,
I will say you should get another set of materials to go in your binders. So you may want to bring your binder back. And I believe you'll get, I'm sorry.
We're going to be providing it in another binder.
Oh, never mind. Scratch that.
That's okay. Yeah.
Tiara, will the college and career readiness standards be in that binder, or do they need to bring that from their other binder?
Yes, they would need to bring those. Now, we will only be providing the Institute 2 resources in that binder. So yes, bring a copy of your standards, or you can have it downloaded on your device.
And how about Empower books and other books? Are they getting more of those?
They are. They're sitting out here on my table right now. They're ready for them.
All right. But they do not need to bring back the others, correct?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent.
Anything else? Well, thank you all for joining. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have fun in your math classes.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it. Phone call. Oops.